You're listening to the Options Insider Radio Network, the home of the Options Podcast. For more quality options programs, visit theoptionsinsider.com or search for Options Insider Radio Network in your podcast provider of choice. Listeners can also access all of our programming through our mobile app available in the iTunes and Google Play stores. Select programs are also available via live stream at mixlr.com/options-insider. That's mixlr.com/options-insider. Don't forget to follow along with your favorite programs and submit your own questions for the hosts at twitter.com/options, stocktwits.com/options, facebook.com/theoptionsinsider, or via questions at theoptionsinsider.com. Bitcoin, Ether, Ripple, Litecoin, and more. Cryptocurrencies and other digital assets are taking the financial world by storm. This exploding market provides everything a savvy trader needs: volatility, volume, and liquidity. Provided you know how to find it. That's where we come in. Welcome to the Crypto Rundown. Each week, we'll break down the latest trading activity, trends, and developments on everything from coins to tokens, futures, and even OTC options. If it's moving the crypto markets, then you'll find it on the Crypto Rundown. This program is brought to you by Genesis Volatility, also known as GVOL, home of institutional-grade crypto options analytics. Whether you're trading CeFi options or DeFi options, cryptocurrencies move. Use GVOL Analytics to analyze implied volatility, model realized volatility, structure positions, and unlock alpha. For more information, visit gvol.io. That's GVOL.io. Now it's time to dive into the exploding world of cryptocurrencies and digital assets. It's time for the Crypto Rundown.
All right, everybody. That music means it is time once again for the Crypto Rundown, the program here on the Options Insider Radio Network, where we step outside the boundaries of our traditional options. Not going to talk Tesla or VIX or SPY or any of that crazy stuff. On this show, we're going to dive deep instead into ETH and Bitcoin and all the fun to be had therein. My name is Mark Longo from theoptionsinsider.com, as well as, of course, from the Options Insider Radio Network, reminding all of you out there, there's so many ways for you guys to access this content. Of course, on demand on just about every platform under the sun. You have your Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Audibles, YouTubes, you name it, so on and so forth. If, of course, you want to get more engaged with the show, you want to join us on live around 2 p.m. Central every Monday here for the Crypto Rundown, as well as for everything else we record live throughout the week. You head on over to theoptionsinsider.com/plus if you want to go above and beyond and get the exclusive content, including an awesome Pro Q&A, going a little bit outside our wheelhouse there tomorrow as well. With our Pro Q&A, we had a great short vol trader on our Pro Q&A sessions a few months ago, and he also happens to be a Blackjack Hall of Famer and noted author in that space as well. So many of you asked if we could bring him back on to do a one-off about blackjack, all things deep, pro, high-level blackjack. So, hey, it's your secret club at the end of the day. You guys asked for it. We delivered, so Don's going to be there tomorrow talking Hall of Fame level blackjack for all of you out there who are intrigued. Kind of a bit of a fun one-off for us out there. If you're intrigued by that sort of fun stuff, as well as all of the other legion of great options and derivatives experts we've had rotating through the hot seat there, theoptionsinsider.com/pro is the place to go to learn more. And of course, wherever you listen live after the fact, hit us up, questions, comments, insights, pearls of wisdom. If you like what you hear, you're on the on-demand side, keep rating and reviewing their platform of choice. It does help all the new folks flooding into the markets these days to discover the content. As we keep on rolling, it is time for the Bitcoin Breakdown.
It's time to explore the latest trending activity, trends, and developments across the world's leading crypto market. It's time for the Bitcoin Breakdown.
All right, everybody, welcome to the Bitcoin Breakdown, the portion of the show where we do just that. We break down all of the action in the world's leading digital asset. Of course, we're talking about the old BTC coming into showtime. We had Bitcoin at about a 43,600 and change. It's a wee bit lower than where we were this time last week. A little over 800, about 830 handles lower than where we were last week. We're at about a 44,440 or so. Said that 5 times fast on the show last week. Of course, we saw a little bit of a range outside of that throughout the week. You hit a high of about almost 49,000, about 48,800 on the 18th, a few sessions ago, and the low was today, 42,537. So we have rebounded off the lows a little bit. Of course, a big sell-off happening out there today in the broad equity markets, and a corresponding sell-off happening out there in the world of crypto. Something to keep in mind for all of you out there who've been positing crypto as this inversely or indeed uncorrelated asset class, a great hedge for your portfolio. We've seen many days like this now. When the equity markets turn hard to the dark side, the crypto markets are not far behind. In fact, they're outpacing the equities yet again. The S&P was off about 2.25% earlier in the session. Bitcoin's off nearly 9% today. ETH's off over 10% just today. So again, if you're looking for these uncorrelated asset classes, especially on the big days like today, which was when the correlation really counts, then crypto is not going to be your friend on these types of days. Just be careful. Keep that in mind out there, listeners. We've done many deep dives on our TWIFO program, This Week in Futures Options. I encourage you to check those out, listeners, if you're intrigued by the cross-asset correlation of all these different products, not just equities, but metals and rates and everything else, even ags. You want to break it all down, how they relate to crypto. We have done that on the TWIFO program in the past. Check out those in the archives. A little bit surprising data, how much correlation there is, and perhaps some surprising correlations between asset classes you wouldn't have expected. How does Bitcoin correlate to crude oil, for example? We have broken all that down on the show. Something just to bear in mind. A lot of the same players in the equities are also playing in crypto these days. So when they need to liquidate, they're liquidating across the board. So not quite the uncorrelated asset class that perhaps you were led to believe when you dove into these waters for the first time. Let's head on out, see what's breaking down and lighting things up from an overall volatility and from a SKEW and every other perspective out there in Bitcoin. Remember, these analytics coming at you courtesy of our friends over there at Genesis Volatility. GVOL.io is the place to go to kick the tires and light the fires for yourselves on these and a whole bunch of other cool analytics. They have Bitcoin, they have ETH, just about anything under the sun you want to analyze in the world of Bitcoin derivatives. They have it. And coming into showtime, as you might expect, given today's sell-off, we are seeing a bit of a pop in the old volatility out there. Our last show, we're at about an 87%. So again, everyone who thought Bitcoin was the most volatile thing on the planet is pretty frothy, pretty volatile, but not quite at a triple digits level until, well, we'll see. We'll get to that. And then, of course, that vol, as you said many times, these vol spikes tend to be short-lived out there in Bitcoin. That's kind of what we saw because that vol dropped nearly 10 points. It was about a 79% coming into earlier in our session here before we saw the sell-off kick off. Once the sell-off kicked off, that vol kicked into high gear, but it was drifting lower, got down to about a 79%. And then, of course, now that we're selling off again, the vol has popped, but it's pretty much back to the level that was on our show last week. It's at about an 88%. So not a huge move, but again, a bit of an upside swing here in vol. Is this going to remain for a while? Are we going to be hanging out in this higher level? Or are we going to start drifting right back down like we have pretty much every other time Bitcoin vol has popped? We shall see. BitVol, which is, of course, our friend Simon Ho's creation out there, a.k.a. the Bitcoin VIX, at about a 91.5. Remember, that's a bit of a lagging indicator out there. On our last show, it was 96.5. It has come in about 5 points. There's a lot of other calculations going on with the VIX type calculations. It's a 30-day rolling. It has SKEW and everything else baked in there. So a little bit different than just the straight kind of 1 hour at the money like we're talking right now with the hourly vol out there in Bitcoin. In terms of the SKEW, how is the SKEW looking? Well, as you might imagine, that's going to change a little bit as well once we start seeing a pretty big sell-off. Our last show, it was kind of negligible. It was slightly into the negative, about 1.5 or 1.6 or so. And then we saw a pretty big swing. It was about 1.7 even coming into this morning, and then it just swung markedly into the negative territory. It got down to about a -7 coming into showtime. So again, that is to be expected as we're seeing a pretty big red day out there. Folks are piling into those types of trades that are going to drive us into the negative SKEW territory. In terms of open interest, ticking up a bit, not a huge change. It'll be interesting to see if today's volume maybe tweaks that a little bit, but coming into showtime, we had about 120,000 calls open in Bitcoin. It's up about 5,000. Again, not a huge change. And the puts are at about 61,000, up about 4,000. So Usually it's these sell-off days that tends to drive some big gains in the OI for the puts. We'll see if that is the case, or perhaps if we blow through a bunch of put strikes, maybe folks will be taking them off, in which case we'll see a bit of a decline in the open interest for the puts. But I would expect, given what we've seen in the past, if we continue selling off, see these puts start sparking back to life. Right now, they're pretty much almost exactly half, 61,000 versus 120,000. So Bitcoin very call heavy right now. We'll see if that continues, if the sell-off continues. In terms of where that OI is lining up, it is still September leading the dance, 65,000 contracts, up about 4,000 from this time last week. A DECE number 2 at 55,000, up about 3,000 from this time last week. And then October bringing up the rear with about 21,500. That's up about 3,500 from this time last week. So October gaining. We'll see if it has time to usurp September. I don't think it's going to before September rolls off the board. Again, in terms of the notional value of that open interest, it's pretty much the same as it was last week. It's about $8 billion out there on Deribit. You add in all the other venues, it's around $9 billion. Not a huge change out there as well. In terms of the big dog, Deribit, it wasn't the busiest of weeks out there, really, until today. We saw some paper coming in today. We'll see if that will continue. But coming into today, the busiest day was the 17th with $873 million worth of notional volume. Remember, just a few shows ago, we had a $1 billion notional volume day, not quite hitting that this past week. We'll see again if today's sell-off can exacerbate things. But other than that, it was pretty much a light week. And in terms of where you folks are lining up, where are these sizable positions right now in Bitcoin options? So if I told you the 100K strike was still the king of the roost, would you believe me? You have to, because it's true. It's 12,500 contracts. That gained a full 1,000 contracts over the course of the past week. So new positioning happening on the 100,000 strike in Bitcoin. Fascinating. Followed by number 2, the 50,000 strike. So pretty much cut in half. 8,400 contracts. That's down a couple of hundred. Not a huge change there. And then number 3, the 60,000 strike with about almost 84. All these middle portion of our top 5 are all neck and neck. Number 3 is the 60,000 strike with about 8,350. Up about 450. And then number 4 is the 80,000 strike with 8,300, up about a couple of hundred again. So neck and neck there for the middle portion. And then the bottom of our top 5, the 20,000 strike with 7,600 contracts, opens up about 100. So not a huge change there. The biggest change was on, again, the 100,000 strike with now 12,500 contracts open. Are they opening buys? I hope not, but we've seen crazier things in the Bitcoin land. Are they the other leg of verticals? Probably, but we'll have to dig in a little more to find out for certain on that latest round of contracts hitting up there. In terms of contracts hitting, you didn't see a ton of that out there in CME this past week. The options, for example, there really weren't any days over 100 contracts, some days in the 80s and others, nothing really blowing the doors off. Even though the OI has ticked up a little bit, it's up to about 1,250. It's up about 200 contracts. Again, not a ton, but that is a 5X contract, so bear that in mind. Futures, again, not a lot of paper on the tape. The busiest day in the futures out there, it looks like it's today, and not a lot of paper on the tape today. Only about 5,700 contracts out there. The OI has pretty much stayed the same as well, about 7,200. That's up slightly from where it was last show, which was up slightly from the week before. So Bitcoin, the big Bitcoin futures really at CME, not doing a ton of paper. Micro getting a little bit more action, but again, not a ton today, which is surprising given the fact you think that would drive a little bit of paper. Only 8,200 micros on the tape. We're used to seeing 15, 16, 20,000 on the tape at least usually. The OI, though, is ticking up out there. It's up to about 27,000. It was 22,000 on our last show. So that's a big swing out there from an OI perspective. Let's save ETH for a little bit. In fact, we got ETH on the brain. Let's get out to the altcoin universe next.
It's time to move beyond Bitcoin and find out what's moving the rest of the crypto marketplace. It's time to boldly venture into the altcoin universe.
All right, everybody, let's explore the altcoin universe together, starting with our rundown of the big dogs out there in the world of altcoin. Let's go number 10, just barely clinging into the top 10. Our old friend Doge at about just a tick over 2 billion worth of market cap. Number 9, Polkadot at about 29 billion, almost exactly. Number 8, good old USD coin, 29.4 billion. So just barely managing to edge out Polkadot, number 7. Solana at about 42.5 billion. Number 6, XRP. 43.5 billion. Number 5, Binance Coin, 62.5 billion. Number 4, Tether, 68 and about a half billion. Number 3, it's Cardano, 68, a little bit north of 68.5 billion. So kind of neck and neck with Tether out there. And then number 2, we got ETH, 362 billion. And of course, the big dog, a little bit smaller again today, Bitcoin with about 826 billion worth of market cap. Let's get on out to the number 2, even though I know for a lot of you, ETH is number 1 in your hearts. Coming into showtime, we were hovering right around the 3,000 strike, about 3,050. That puts it down, about 160 handles from where it was this time last week. We were a little bit north of the 3,200 strike on our last show. The range this week, we did actually break through the 3K strike not too long ago, just this session. About 29.25 was the low on the day so far. So ETH breaking through 3,000 again. They got as high as almost 3,700, about 3,675. That was on the 15th here. Vol, similar deal to what we saw out there in Bitcoin, where we saw a decently elevated vol level last week. It was at about 102, so just barely into the triple digits. And then it drifted lower like Bitcoin vol has been doing of late as well. Got down to about an 89% until the sell-off kicked into gear over the past 24 hours. And now we've seen that vol race right back up to where it was this time last week, up to about 103. So we're back in the triple digits level. Will we hang out there, or will it continue to drift down again like we've seen many other times this year? We'll keep an eye on that. SKEW-wise, same deal as Bitcoin. It was a little bit more negative to start, though. It was negative 2.25 on our last show. It actually had to rally. It got up to about a positive 1 earlier in the session, and then in the past 24 hours, once the sell-off really kicked in, that SKEW swung markedly negative. It's almost a negative 5 now, about negative 4.6. So swung from a positive 1 to negative 4.6 just in the past 24 hours out there as the sell-off has commenced. In terms of volume, a pretty light week. Pretty much today is the busiest day. Coming into showtime, we had almost 400 million worth of notional volume going up on Deribit, about 388 million. We'll see if that can usurp some of the days we've seen recently. The 9/7 was kind of the big day for recent levels out there, about 635 million worth of notional going up on the 7th. It's been a while since we've seen those rock'em sock'em robots days. You got to go really back to April and May to get the 1 billion days. Looks like the last day we saw 1 billion worth of notional was the 19th of May. Since then, it's pretty much been mostly 200, 300, 100 million. So not a ton of volume. So 600 odd million worth of notional. Nothing to sneeze at. We'll see if today, if it can get even higher. OI, we have seen a pretty decent change out there in ETH OI in terms of contracts. Calls ticking up, 954,000 contracts open out there in ETH land right now. It's up about 64,000 from this time last week. The puts, 464,000 contracts open. It's up about 14,000. So we are still in a similar paradigm there, roughly 2-to-1 calls over puts in ETH, just like we see out there in Bitcoin. If we keep selling off, will that ratio change? Probably. We saw it change last time Bitcoin and ETH sold off. We'll see if that holds course going forward as well. In terms of the notional value, I have seen the contracts increase, but of course, ETH is selling off, and we're seeing the notional value of the overall outstanding OI pretty much hovering around the same level, about 5 billion last show and about 5 billion open on Deribit this show as well. In terms of where you guys are lining up from a monthly expiration perspective, it's usually the quarterlies, and that remains the case this week. DEES number 1, 453,000 contracts open. It's up about 22,000 from this time last week. September closing in 404,000 contracts open in September, up about 77,000 contracts. So a lot of action in September. Then March, a distant number 3 with 155,000 contracts. It's up about 10,000 from this time last week. When you folks want to play in ETH options, you're playing in the near data stuff, you're playing out there in September. In terms of strikes, where are you folks lining up? Where are the size open positions in ETH options right now? Remember, we said in Bitcoin, it was the 100,000 strike that is dominating the tape. Is it something similar in ETH? Well, kind of, not quite as outlandish. It's the 5,000 strike out there. So that's still pretty optimistic with 99,000 contracts open right now. It's up about 11,000 from this time last week, followed by number 2, the 10K strike with 63,000 contracts open. It's actually down a couple of thousand from this time last week. Number 3, the 6,000 strike, 55,400, up about 2,100 from this time last week. Number 4, the 4,000 strike, 55,300. Again, neck and neck there, up about 6,400 contracts from last week. And rounding out our top 5, the 7,000 strike with 53,000 contracts opens up about 600 or so from this time last week. The futures over there in ETH land and CME, not doing a ton of paper today, probably the busiest day with about 5,700. In fact, ironically, ETH futures and the Bitcoin futures doing almost the exact same volume today with about 5,600 and change going up out there. So we'll see if that causes a bit of a spark of life. The OI has crept up ever so slightly, up to about 4,300 from 4,000 this time last week. Let's look at some of the rest of the altcoin you folks love to sling out there. Ripple selling off again, off about 13.5 cents. Coming into showtime was shy of a buck, 92 cents out there. This time last week, it was about 106. And then, of course, Bitcoin Cash down about 70 bucks, almost 71, and Bitcoin SV down about 11 from this time last week. And let's round it out with our old friend Doge, down about 2.5 cents from this time last week. And if you are intrigued, Litecoin, of course, making some interesting moves on our show last week. There was the infamous pump and dump coming into our show last week. Litecoin is at about a 180. It is continuing its downward trajectory down to about a 158, down about 21.25 since our last show, off about 10% just today. So a rough day out there for you Litecoin fans. Speaking of you fans, let's see what you folks are up to. Let's head on out to a little bit of the old crypto questions.
You've got questions about crypto. Who doesn't? It's time to find out the answers to your crypto questions.
All right, crypto fans, let's see what you folks have on the brain. First, let's go out to Todd. Todd C. He says, did this El Salvador thing really matter that much? It seems like the answer is no. Remember on our last show, listeners, Bill Ulivari was really excited about what's been going on. El Salvador effectively taking, Bitcoin as legal tender over there for a national currency in addition to the old USD out there. He was really excited about it. Todd included a link to, I think this comes from the Wall Street Journal, who was quoting a source called Civic Science. They had a chart on people's opinion of this. The question they asked was, did El Salvador's move add legitimacy to crypto? The title of this graph is, El Salvador has become the first country in the world to adopt Bitcoin as a national currency. In your opinion, is this move likely to make Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies seem more legitimate as a financial instrument? And the results here are pretty surprising. No, 56%, followed by maybe. They gave him 3 choices, actually, so they gave him a wiggle one in the middle. Maybe 28%, and yes, a firm yes, only 17%. Looks like they had nearly 4,000 responses. So, yeah, I mentioned on the show last week that it seemed like the market kind of took that news as bullish for a very short period. Then we moved on to other things that were driving us to the dark side. Doesn't seem like that news is helping us much this week. So, does seem, Todd, like you are correct. In addition to this poll, the market has spoken, and whatever bullish optimism was shined as a result of El Salvador giving a little bit more legitimacy to Bitcoin. It didn't really last too long. We have moved on to other things. That seems to be the whim of the crypto markets. A marketplace of products that don't really have a lot of fundamentals to drive them tend to be buffeted a little bit more by the whims of what's going on out there in the marketplace. What's Musk tweeting? What's Mark Cuban saying? What are the SEC up to? All these other things that are out there lurking. And lately, the SEC has kind of been the dominant factor in driving things a lot to the dark side. So maybe if it was a larger country, if we saw China coming out and saying, hey, Bitcoin, our national currency now, that would be a game changer. Not sure if El Salvador quite in that same level, and it seems like at least this poll from the Journal and Civic Science tends to agree. Interesting stuff. A lot of you folks sharing data with us today and articles. Dishonored, I like that handle, Dishonored with a Z, also writing in saying, crazy sell-off in crypto today. Yeah, you're right. He says, so much for the folks looking for a portfolio hedge with crypto. Yes, we talked about that earlier there, Dishonored, but you're right. If you are coming in and looking for an allocation to crypto and thinking it's going to provide this uncorrelated asset class in the times when you need it most, you may be disappointed. So long as you're going with your eyes open, there are values and interesting things to be explored in the crypto space. I just don't know if you should lean too heavily on the uncorrelated asset part of it, because as we've seen many times, that is not the case. As crypto becomes more widespread, as more traditional equity players are diving into the crypto space, we are going to see more correlations out there as a result. Something to bear in mind. Maybe in the very early days, when this was something that was very hard to get, you really had to mine it. So there was a huge barrier to entry at that point. In those days, sure, Bitcoin could very much be seen as a non-correlated asset class. These days, when it's pretty widespread, when its fluctuations are headline-making news around the world, a little bit of a different story. He also adds another link to his article and says, how do you think this sell-off will impact the Coinbase money train? And he puts a link here to this article saying, Coinbase looking to raise $1.5 billion through a debt offering. I noticed they're not issuing more shares routes. They've already gone that route with the IPO. This article is from Reuters. They're saying Coinbase planning to raise about $1.5 billion through a debt offering to invest in product development and potential mergers and acquisitions. Of course, as they mentioned in this article, this comes less than a week after the SEC said they're going to sue Coinbase if they launch their interest-bearing digital asset program. They have some differing viewpoints at the SEC over those. So, again, it's a chance for Coinbase to raise some capital. It does seem like folks were pretty receptive, at least early on, to the IPO. It does also seem like Coinbase's fate is very much tied to the valuations of these crypto assets. If we do see a prolonged and protracted sell-off, I don't want this to happen, but if we do see another crypto winter come in, we're seeing a lot of downside on the screen for the foreseeable future, that probably will come into play over here in Coinbase and their valuation at the end of the day. I do think it's interesting that they are not offering more shares. They're going the debt route, and I think the SEC, that sort of Damocles poised over Coinbase right now, and indeed the whole crypto market. That could have some interesting ramifications for this. This article looks like it's about a week old. I haven't seen new updates to this. Again, the sell-off in and of itself today, not a big deal. If it continues and is protracted for an extended period of time, I think, yes, that will impact Coinbase's ability to raise funds and also its overall stock price out there at the end of the day. Let's see how Coinbase is looking on a day when everything is selling off. Well, Coinbase down almost 13 handles, about 5.25%, around 232.5. So yes, not exactly a banner day here for Coinbase. If you're wondering, the high on that stock, 429.5, and the low is 208. So we are almost exactly 200 points below the high out there and not that far from the all-time low. So we shall see how this fares going forward. Right now, not great news. But again, we'll have to wait and see if the sell-off continues before we know the longer-term impact on Coinbase, on its stock price, and on its ability to raise capital going forward. All right, everybody, that's going to do it. Took a bit of a break from the hot seat this week. A bit of a Just the Facts, ma'am edition. I know you folks like your data hot and heavy, coming in quick, and then move on with your day, trying to keep you on that schedule over there. Speaking of schedules, of course, got the great Pro Q&A coming up tomorrow. I know for a lot of you as well, you're newer to the world of options. Our Education Wednesday content, Options Bootcamp, Options Playbook Radio. If you're not subscribed to those podcasts already, and for some reason you're not subscribed to the full network, you should definitely go subscribe to those podcasts because they will really get you up to speed. If any of these terms we're throwing around here on the show, volatility, SKEW, all these kind of things, if that's confusing to you, Options Bootcamp, Options Playbook Radio. Start at the beginning, ease your way through, learn on your own schedule so you become a little bit more acclimated so these terms aren't as impenetrable and intimidating to you going forward. Then, of course, we're back again next Monday, another episode of the Crypto Rundown. We'll see you then.
This program is brought to you by Genesis Volatility, also known as GVOL, home of institutional-grade crypto options analytics. Whether you're trading CeFi options or DeFi options, cryptocurrencies move. Use GVOL Analytics to analyze implied volatility, model realized volatility, structure positions, and unlock alpha. For more information, visit gvol.io. That's GVOL.io. You're listening to the Options Insider Radio Network, the home of the Options Podcast. For more quality options programs, visit theoptionsinsider.com or search for Options Insider Radio Network in your podcast provider of choice. Listeners can also access all of our programming through our mobile app available in the iTunes and Google Play stores. Select programs are also available via live stream at mixlr.com/options-insider. That's mixlr.com/options-insider. Don't forget to follow along with your favorite programs and submit your own questions for the hosts at twitter.com/options, stocktwits.com/options, facebook.com/theoptionsinsider, or via questions@theoptionsinsider.com.